Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. To save Brandon Walker, who was gravely injured and lying in a coma, I stood up without hesitation when Evelyn Cooper swore she would rather die than marry him. I agreed to take her place and go through with the ritual wedding ceremony to wash away the bad luck. After the wedding, I devoted myself to caring for him, patiently tending to every detail. Eventually, I waited until he woke up. I managed everything in and outside the household, supported him while he built his business from scratch, and truly believed my genuine love and efforts had touched my husband. But when I fell seriously ill and couldn't afford to stay in the hospital, I was forced to check out early. At that very moment, Brandon was spending millions to buy jewelry for Evelyn. If you hadn't taken advantage of the situation and married me back then, I could have married the woman I truly loved, he said coldly. And Evelyn wouldn't have wasted so many years of her life waiting for me. You owe her this. Only then did I realize Brandon had harbored resentment toward me all these years. He believed that when I agreed to take Evelyn's place, I had schemed to marry into his family. He thought I was manipulative, calculating, and that he would have preferred never waking up at all over being married to a woman he didn't love. Heartbroken, I returned home ready to die. In the end, both Brandon and I perished in a sudden fire at our villa. When I opened my eyes again, we had both been reborn back at the very scene of that ritual wedding. This time, Brandon got what he always wanted. He married the woman of his dreams. Then someone knocked at our front gate. A handsome, shy young man stood there holding a box of gifts. "Summer," he said, blushing, "I'd like to date you with the intention of marriage." Huh, why would I marry Brandon Walker again? He's already half dead. I don't owe him anything. If you hadn't gone to pick flowers for me, our son wouldn't have gotten injured like that. You have to take responsibility. The intense shouting startled me awake from my painful haze. As I looked around at the lively and familiar scene in front of me, I instantly realized I had truly come back. Right now, Brandon was still in a coma from his injuries. His family had shown up at Evelyn's home, trying to force them to hand her over for the wedding ceremony, but the Coopers refused. In their desperation, the Walkers turned their eyes on me, hoping to throw the burden onto someone else. "Summer, I know you're a kind-hearted girl," Brandon's father said. "Brandon is unconscious, but if someone marries him and completes the ritual, it could save his life." I knew full well that Mr. Walker wasn't trying to save Brandon for love. He just needed someone to take care of his unconscious son. If they couldn't find anyone, they'd probably abandon him altogether. In my past life, I had married Brandon because I truly loved him. I willingly took care of him, only to be repaid with hatred and a tragic end. This time, I refused to repeat the same mistake. But before I could even respond, a familiar voice suddenly rang out, panicked and loud. "Stop!" I turned my head and saw Brandon Walker, covered in sweat, limping toward me as fast as he could. When his father saw him awake, he was overjoyed. "Brandon, you're awake." But Brandon ignored everyone else and glared at me. "Summer, don't even think about using this chance to worm your way in. The woman I love is Evelyn Cooper. I would never marry you." And just like that, I understood. Brandon had been reborn too. His leg was still fractured, his head still wrapped in gauze, but he endured the pain just to rush here and stop the wedding. He was genuinely afraid that history might repeat itself and he'd end up marrying me again. Looking at the man I once loved with all my heart, my chest tightened with bitterness. I had spent over 20 years by his side, managing everything, supporting him from nothing, caring for him in sickness, and in the end, he repaid me with nothing but hatred and disdain. Brandon Walker, who said, "I wanted to marry you. I sincerely wish you and Evelyn a lifetime of happiness. At least you're self-aware," Brandon scoffed, fueled by the sweet memories of finally reuniting with his true love in his past life. Brandon confidently stepped forward and proposed, "Evelyn, marry me. I promise I'll love you for the rest of my life." He was full of confidence. Evelyn had loved him so deeply. Now that he had a second chance, surely he could make up for his past mistakes and spend the rest of his life in happiness with her. But Evelyn wasn't interested at all. Who wants to marry a useless nobody? Even Mr. Cooper looked unimpressed. "You want to marry my daughter with empty hands? At least $2,000 in bride price, or don't even bother." Brandon instinctively reached for his wallet, but his pocket was completely empty. Before Brandon even had the chance to ask his father for the money, Mr. Walker pulled a pained expression and played the sympathy card. Brandon, you know our family was never well off to begin with. Treating your injuries already cost us a fortune. We really don't have any money left. I noticed Brandon's face darken a bit. He probably hadn't expected that just after being reborn, before he could even marry his so-called true love, he'd be stopped cold by a mere $2,000. Suddenly, he turned to me and barked, "Summer, hurry up and give me $2,000. I was so taken aback by his tone that I actually laughed. Brandon Walker, are you a beggar now, asking me for money the moment you open your mouth? Besides, I don't have $2,000 to give you." He scoffed arrogantly. Your family are all working-class folks. Don't tell me you can't scrape together $2,000. You're just refusing because you want to ruin my wedding with Evelyn. You're hoping to take her place and marry me instead, aren't you? Don't even think about it. I'll only ever love Evelyn. I will never marry anyone else. Now go home and bring the money. Don't ruin my perfect timing with Evelyn. I gave him a small smile and said mockingly, "So your true love won't marry you unless she gets $2,000? Then is this really love, or just a business transaction?" The moment those words left my mouth, the onlookers burst into laughter, the sarcasm in their voices cutting deep. Brandon's face turned beet red from embarrassment. He had spent years building his career and had always been respected. He could drop millions on jewelry without batting an eye. Who would have thought he'd one day be laughed at for not being able to come up with $2,000? In the end, he had to write an IOU promising to repay it soon before he could finally carry his bride on his back, beaming with pride. Just before leaving, Brandon shot me a smug look, but I saw the look of disgust and reluctance in Evelyn's eyes as she clung to his back. I thought to myself he was celebrating far too early. He wasn't a multimillionaire CEO anymore, and there wouldn't be another fool like me to devote her entire life to him. I had no interest in attending that wedding banquet. I returned home alone. When my brother saw my expression, he looked concerned and asked, "Summer, are you okay?" Everyone in my family knew I had secretly loved Brandon Walker for years. They were worried I'd be heartbroken, but I simply shook my head and smiled. "Don't worry about me, brother. I'm fine." No matter how deep the feelings once were, after learning the truth about Brandon's contempt for me after dying such a painful death, everything had long been burned to ashes. My brother observed me for a while, clearly still uneasy, then he slipped out of the house quietly. The next morning there was a sudden knock at the door. My brother practically ran to open it. Standing outside was someone I hadn't seen in years, but I recognized him instantly. Lucas Miles, my brother's old friend. A tall, handsome young man. His arms were full of bags and boxes, and even more were piled at his feet. "Lucas?" I asked, puzzled. His handsome face turned slightly red, and he looked at me with bashful eyes. "Summer, I'd like to date you with marriage as my goal. These are gifts I bought for you." I was stunned. Though 20 years had passed, I remembered how close Lucas had been with my brother, and he had always treated me kindly too. He used to bring delicious snacks or practical gifts whenever he came to visit. But after I got married, he was transferred to work in the capital and we lost contact. Later, my brother told me Lucas had died unexpectedly at a young age. He hadn't even gotten married. Looking at the way he gazed at me now, I realized for the first time that Lucas had liked me back then. Seeing me frozen and speechless, my brother nudged me quickly. "Summer, say yes. Brandon's already married. Don't hang yourself on that one tree. If you ask me, Lucas is 100 times better than that guy." In this new life, I had already decided to let go of Brandon Walker and start over. Looking at the nervous sweat on Lucas's face and the way his eyes stared straight into mine, waiting anxiously for my answer, my heart began to stir. I smiled and nodded, okay. The moment I said yes, my brother burst into laughter and clapped his hands. "Yes. Finally, you two are together. Let Brandon Walker regret it for the rest of his life." After I started dating Lucas Miles, it was the first time I ever truly felt what it meant to be loved. He offered to give me most of his salary, but when I turned him down, he started finding all kinds of ways to buy me thoughtful gifts instead. During our dates, he always made sure to walk on the outside to shield me from traffic. He remembered every single one of my preferences down to the smallest detail. These past few days, Lucas's factory had been extremely busy, and he needed to work overtime to meet deadlines. So, I carefully prepared dinner and brought it to him outside the factory gates. But before Lucas could come out, I saw Brandon Walker strutting over. The moment he spotted me standing outside with the lunchbox in hand, he smugly raised his chin and said, "Summer, are you seriously bringing me food again? I'm married now. You better keep your distance. But just for today I'll let it slide. Did you bring my favorite braised pork?" Life had clearly taken a turn for the worse for him. After years of living in luxury, this must have felt like unbearable suffering. I stared at Brandon, who was looking down on me while simultaneously reaching out his hand for the lunchbox. I took a step back and said flatly, "Brandon Walker, this food is for you. Don't flatter yourself," he scoffed, still pretending. "If it's not for me, then who else? Your family doesn't work at this factory. That bag must have medicine for my fractured leg. Perfect timing. I could use some." I shot back. "This is for my boyfriend. It has nothing to do with you." But Brandon didn't believe a word. "You have a boyfriend? Please. Who else would want you besides me? Stop playing these hard-to-get games. Just hand over the medicine already. My leg's been killing me. If your leg hurts, go see a doctor," I said impatiently. "Why are you pestering me?" Brandon was clearly acting so brazenly because he knew how deeply I had once loved him. Back then, after we got married, he was in a coma and had a fractured leg. His family didn't care for him at all. I was the one who bathed him, massaged his entire body daily, and stayed by his side until he woke up. When I found out his leg injury had lingering complications, I hunted down a retired herbalist and begged for a prescription for a healing plaster. I bought the ingredients myself, made the medicine from scratch, and applied it for him every day just so he could recover fully. But all that had come from a heart that once truly cared. Now my efforts were only for someone who truly deserved them. I had prepared this plaster because I heard Lucas's grandfather had an old injury that hadn't healed properly, not for this ungrateful jerk. Brandon had the nerve to blame me. "This is all your fault," he growled. "If you had just given me the $2,000, I wouldn't have had to rush back to work." He clearly wanted to rest, but he still owed his father-in-law the bride price and had to make monthly payments. Evelyn was working, but she refused to contribute a single cent to household expenses. So, even though his injury hadn't healed, he had no choice but to return to work. He remembered how in his last life he got to rest at home for more than half a year after waking up. Nothing like this hardship. He had thought that being reborn would mean a smoother life, but aside from successfully marrying Evelyn, everything else was an utter disaster. He didn't even have the funds to start a business. As he went on and on blaming me, I laughed and said, "Isn't this the life you chose? If you want to marry your true love, of course you'll have to suffer for it. Otherwise, how would it prove that love is worth it?" Honestly, I knew even better than Brandon how bad his leg injury really was. If he didn't rest now and insisted on working, he was definitely going to end up with permanent damage. Brandon was so choked by my response that he couldn't get a word out. He was about to argue again when a voice shouted behind him, "Brandon Walker, what are you doing? You're a married man. Why are you harassing a female coworker?" Brandon turned around and instantly froze when he saw Lucas. He quickly tried to act obedient, but before he could even come up with an excuse, his younger sister came running up in a panic. "Brandon, something's wrong. Evelyn and our sister-in-law are fighting again." Brandon's face went pale as he rushed to grab his bike and pedal away. As soon as he was gone, Lucas turned to me with concern. "Did Brandon give you trouble just now? I'll report him to HR if he keeps it up." "That would be great, thanks, Lucas," I said cheerfully, lifting the lunchbox and smiling brightly. Once I got home, I figured I'd soon be hearing even more gossip. Brandon Walker had only been married for less than a month, and yet the entire Walker household was already falling apart. It gave me something new to witness in town every single day. As time passed, my relationship with Lucas Miles grew deeper, and our two families began making plans to finalize our engagement. One day, Lucas had to stay at work late for an unexpected overtime shift. He gave me some money to help purchase wedding supplies, so I headed out to get a few things. That's when I ran into Brandon again. He was at a store, staring longingly at a pair of brand new leather shoes on display. He kept looking at them over and over but wouldn't buy them, to the point that the saleswoman started losing her patience. "Are you buying these or not?" she snapped. "If you're not, then stop touching them. They're brand new, and you're going to wear them out." Brandon had been used to high status in his previous life. He wasn't used to this kind of public humiliation. His face flushed red with anger. "Who said I wasn't buying them? Can I take a closer look first?" "Then buy them already," the saleswoman said, clearly irritated, sizing him up. "Up with a glance, your shoes are falling apart. And it's obvious you don't have a cent in your pocket. If you can't afford them, don't pretend you're some big shot. You're just embarrassing yourself." Brandon opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out because she was right. He didn't have any money. That's when he spotted me and the bags of wedding supplies I was holding. His eyes lit up instantly. "Summer, I'll give you a chance," he said. "Buy these shoes for me." I stared at him, speechless. Why would I do that? Brandon glanced at the wedding items I was carrying and snorted. "You're already out buying wedding stuff. Quit pretending you're just waiting for me and Evelyn to divorce so you can jump in and marry me. Right?" "I have a fiancé," I replied calmly. "These are for our wedding. None of this has anything to do with you. Liar. You love me too much to marry anyone else," he said, convinced. The saleswoman had seen enough. She jumped in. "This young lady does have a fiancé, and he's very generous with her, not like you, cheap and broke." Brandon looked shocked. "Wow, Summer, you even bribed the sales staff to lie for you now. But no matter what tricks you play, I'm not divorcing Evelyn to marry you. Still, if you're willing to invest in my new business, I might let you be my mistress." Then he leaned in a little, lowering his voice. "I know you were reborn too. You should already understand what I'm capable of. Being my mistress would be a privilege for you." I hadn't even responded when the saleswoman gave him a look like he was mentally unstable and whispered under her breath, "Geez, and here I thought he was just stingy. Turns out he's nuts." I couldn't have agreed more. There was no reasoning with Brandon anymore, so I didn't bother. I picked up my bags and walked out. After that, Lucas and I stayed busy preparing for our wedding. On the big day, I sat in my room wearing a beautiful red wedding dress, waiting to be picked up. My heart was overflowing with happiness and excitement. This time, I wasn't a stand-in bride forced into a ritual marriage. I was truly getting married for real. Meanwhile, the Walker household had erupted into another argument. After a storm of shouting and slamming, Brandon finally exploded. "Evelyn, do you do anything besides spend money? You don't cook, you don't clean, you don't even help out with the bills. If I had known this would happen, I would have waited and married Summer. I should never have married a useless woman like you." Evelyn sneered. "Oh really? Then go marry her. Summer's getting married now anyway. You really think she'd want you back?" "That's not true. She wouldn't marry someone else." Brandon panicked. For the first time, even Evelyn was saying it now. Had she been bribed by Summer too? "Don't believe me? Go see for yourself." Evelyn snapped. "Like you. Only someone unlucky like me would end up stuck with you." Evelyn's words hit like a hammer. Brandon didn't even finish the argument. He raced out the door and onto his bike, his heart pounding as he rushed toward my family's home. Just as he turned into our alley, he saw a bright splash of red in the distance, an ominous sight that only deepened his dread. Ignoring the sharp pain in his leg, he forced himself to run amid the sound of drums and wedding music. Brandon saw me dressed head to toe in vibrant red, my face glowing with shyness as I stood in the arms of another man. "No way, there's no way Summer would marry someone else." Brandon Walker stormed forward in a rage and shouted, "Summer, what the hell are you doing? Get off that man right now." I hadn't expected Brandon to cause a scene like this on my wedding day. "Brandon Walker," I said coldly, "I'm marrying my fiancé. What are you doing here making a mess?" My older brother immediately stepped forward and shoved him. "What's your problem, huh? Just because my sister wouldn't lend you money to get married last time, now you're deliberately showing up to ruin her wedding." Brandon ignored him and kept his eyes fixed on me. "Summer, I know you're just trying to spite me. You roped someone in to fake this wedding, but this has gone too far. I'm telling you, stop this charade." I had nothing more to say to Brandon. Maybe in our past life, I had loved him so deeply that it gave him the illusion I would always love him no matter what. But I had already moved on from that failed marriage. I had found someone truly worth spending my life with, and yet he still thought I had staged an entire wedding just to upset him. Lucas frowned and stepped in front of me protectively. "Brandon Walker," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If you've come to attend our wedding, you're welcome, but if you cause any more trouble, don't blame me for what happens next. You don't work at the factory right now." Brandon sneered. "You don't get to tell me what to do." And Summer, how could you go along with his little act? My brother had had enough. "Brandon, what's wrong with you? Didn't you hear what my sister and her husband said? They're legally married. What kind of idiot thinks they put on a show just for you?" Neighbors nearby chimed in, shaking their heads in disbelief. "Brandon Walker, did you hit your head or something? Maybe it never healed right." "Yeah, come on Brandon, stop making a scene. We're all here to celebrate. This guy's a riot. Who the hell throws an entire wedding just to mess with him? What's next? He wants a refund for the show." I couldn't let Brandon keep ruining my wedding. Lucas had waited for me for so long. Even if he wasn't tired, I felt terrible letting him deal with this chaos. So I pulled our marriage certificate from my pocket, opened the bright red booklet, and held it up in front of Brandon's face. "Can you see clearly now? This is our marriage license. Lucas and I are legally married. The past is over. Lucas is my husband now." Brandon stared at the certificate in disbelief. He wanted so badly to say it was fake, that I couldn't possibly have married someone else, but the official seal stamped deep into the page said otherwise. I was smiling like a flower, leaning gently into Lucas. Anyone who saw it would agree we looked like the picture of a happy couple. Brandon's eyes turned bloodshot. He couldn't accept what he was seeing. "Summer, how could you marry someone else? You betrayed me, Brandon." I said coldly. "Are we even in a relationship? Who I marry is none of your business." I couldn't understand what he was trying to do. He'd seen the marriage certificate with his own eyes, yet he was still losing his mind. He had always claimed to love Evelyn and had made it crystal clear that he despised me, so why wasn't he happy now that I was out of his life? Brandon clenched his fists and glared at me. "You're my wife. Of course you can't marry someone else. I know you only got married to make me jealous, right? I'm the one you truly love. You couldn't possibly be happy with another man." Lucas finally lost his temper. With one swift kick, he knocked Brandon to the ground and signaled for the groomsmen to restrain him. They pinned Brandon to the floor, stopping him from getting anywhere near me. Honestly, what Brandon had just said was laughable. "Brandon Walker, you're shorter and less attractive than my husband. Your job title is several ranks lower. You're not nearly as kind or thoughtful as he is, so tell me, where do you get the confidence to think I'd give up Lucas for you?" As soon as I finished speaking, Lucas, who had been all fire and fury just a second ago, turned bright red and lowered his head in embarrassment. He was so bashful he couldn't even meet my eyes. Brandon, on the other hand, looked completely devastated. "Summer, how could you say something like that to me?" But clearly, the surrounding neighbors watching the scene unfold had the same thoughts I did. They all started chiming in. "Exactly. Just look at Lucas, tall, handsome, and so much more presentable than Brandon. He was no match even before. Now that he's limping, it's a total joke. Not to mention there's clearly something wrong with his head too. A guy like that isn't even worthy of shining Lucas's shoes. Seriously, anyone with eyes would know who to choose. Who'd pass up Lucas for someone like him?" None of them bothered to lower their voices. Brandon could hear everything. Hearing them tear him apart, how he didn't compare to Lucas in any way. How they were all calling him names. His face twisted with fury. "Shut up. I'm not crippled. My leg will heal. I'm going to be a multimillionaire in the future. How the hell could I not be better than Lucas Miles, some low-grade engineer?" The street went silent for a second. Then the neighbors all looked at each other, shook their heads and muttered, "Yep." The poor guy's brain really didn't recover. I saw how shattered Brandon looked, and I leaned in closer to Lucas, wrapping my arms around his neck. "Let's go, honey. We shouldn't miss the ceremony." Lucas gave a gentle hum in response, bent down, and carried me into the car. Brandon tried to follow, but a group of strong groomsmen held him back firmly. All he could do was watch helplessly. As his ex-wife disappeared into the distance in another man's arms, he wandered back home like a soulless shell. As he walked the streets, the same neighbors who had just watched the wedding now pointed and whispered about him, their eyes clearly focused on his limp. Hearing the word echo again and again, he panicked and rushed to the hospital. "What did you say?" Brandon leapt from his seat, staring at the doctor in disbelief. The doctor remained patient. "I understand this may be hard to accept, but your leg won't heal completely. The fracture was serious to begin with. If you had rested properly, there might have been a chance, but since you didn't, full recovery is no longer possible." "You're saying my leg will stay like this forever?" "That I'll stay, eh?" Brandon murmured, unable to accept it. "It's not as bad as that." The doctor tried to console him. "It's just slightly off. You'll be able to live a normal life." But Brandon couldn't hear anything else. In his previous life, his leg had eventually healed so well there hadn't even been a scar. That had led him to believe the injury wasn't that serious, that with enough time it would naturally heal. So in this life he had completely ignored it. He was back at work the day after waking up. He stood for hours each day, ignored the pain and never thought twice about it. Now, hearing that his leg had been severely injured all along, and that even with proper rest it might only possibly have healed, hit him like a ton of bricks. He remembered how in his last life he hadn't needed to work at all. Summer had stayed by his side every day, carefully helping him through recovery. She had even found some herbal remedy and brewed the stinky concoction at home, filling the entire place with the smell of Chinese medicine, just to make him special patches to help his bones heal faster. Thinking of all that, Brandon staggered, nearly losing his balance. The care he had once brushed off now felt priceless. Without Summer, there was no way he would have healed in the first place. And now, without her, he had become the very thing others pitied and mocked. Brandon returned home in a daze, but the moment he stepped through the door, Evelyn Cooper flew into a rage, pointing at him and yelling, "You're married to me and you're still thinking about another woman. I want a divorce." Looking at Evelyn, hysterical and shrieking like a banshee, Brandon suddenly felt a deep gnawing regret. In their past life, Evelyn had never even raised her voice to him. Even knowing he had a wife, she had clung to him shamelessly and willingly played the role of the mistress. But now, he was just an ordinary injured man, no longer the powerful CEO worth millions. All he faced now was resentment. He let out a cold laugh. "If I had been loyal, you would have never had the chance to hook up with me in the first place." Evelyn's face twisted in fury. "What the hell is that supposed to mean, you crippled jerk? Now you're acting like you're too good for me. You want out? Fine. I must have been cursed," Evelyn said. "I never thought I'd end up marrying a loser like you. We're getting divorced right now." Brandon Walker had already had enough. All he could think about now was fixing every mistake he'd made and finding his one true love again. "Fine, I'll divorce you," Evelyn said. "But you turned a perfectly good single woman like me into a divorced one. You'd better compensate me with $2,000 that I owe you. You gave my dad, and you still have to pay that in full even if we split." Brandon stared at the woman in front of him. Every word out of her mouth was about money. Her eyes were full of calculation and selfishness. All the rage and regret he'd been bottling up exploded in an instant. He lashed out with his fists, one punch after another, venting every ounce of bitterness and hatred he'd been carrying. It wasn't until Evelyn's screams grew faint that others finally rushed in to pull him off her. Later, I saw Brandon standing outside the factory gates. I looked at him calmly and said, "Brandon, I don't think there's anything left for us to talk about." His face twitched slightly. He quickly pulled out a divorce certificate and handed it to me eagerly. "Summer, I've already divorced Evelyn. I finally realize she's nothing but a greedy, shallow woman. She's nothing compared to you." The news of their divorce had been going around for days. I had already heard, but what surprised me was that Brandon had actually hit her. Evelyn had once been the so-called love of his life, his untouchable goddess, and now he'd beaten her into the hospital. "So what?" I asked. "What does your divorce have to do with me?" Brandon pleaded. "Summer, I know now I was wrong. I was a bastard. I never realized you were the one who truly cared for me. Think about how good things were between us in our past life before Evelyn showed up. Can't we go back to those days?" I let out a cold laugh. "So things are going badly now, and that's why you suddenly missed the past?" Even though police rarely intervened in domestic violence cases these days, What Brandon did had stirred up too much bad publicity. The factory fired him. With no job, he had no income. At home, his brother and sister-in-law constantly complained, and his parents didn't defend him at all. Word was he'd be kicked out soon. All of this I heard through idle chatter, but I felt no sympathy. This was exactly the kind of life he deserved. In our past life, I had walked into the fire alone, fueled by love, and lifted Brandon up from the ashes. But now I was wide awake. I would never make that mistake again, and I rejected him without hesitation. No, my life now is already far better than it was with you. You can't even compare to my husband. Brandon hadn't expected even I would turn him down. He grew frantic. Summer, Lucas Miles is just a low-grade engineer. How is he better than me? You know what I built in my last life? I made us rich. I scoffed. You mean that great life where I couldn't even afford my hospital bills and was forced to go home and wait for death? That's the good life you gave me. Face twisted in pain and regret, but he had no response. Just then I saw Lucas riding up on his bicycle. I didn't want to waste another second with Brandon. My husband's here to pick me up. I have nothing else to say to you. Don't come looking for me again. I don't want him to get the wrong idea. Without waiting to see Brandon's reaction, I happily ran over to meet Lucas, took the warm roasted sweet potato from his arms, and hopped onto the back of his bike. We rode home relaxed and carefree. When we got home, I saw Lucas quietly washing vegetables, looking adorably sulky. I leaned close, grinning. Honey, it was Brandon who showed up out of nowhere. I had no intention of seeing him. He beat up his own wife. I was scared enough already. At the mention of it, Lucas immediately forgot his pout. He looked up, alarmed. Did he hit you? No, I reassured him. Not in front of so many people. He wouldn't dare lay a hand on you. Then why did he come find you? Lucas finally asked the question he'd clearly been holding in all along. After all, he had always known that I used to love Brandon Walker. Because of that, he had buried his own feelings deep down for so long. It wasn't until Brandon married someone else that Lucas finally had his chance with me. But even so, on our wedding day, when Brandon suddenly showed up looking like he was about to crash the ceremony, Lucas had been sweating bullets with nerves until he heard me clearly and firmly choose him. That moment reassured him, but now, hearing that Brandon was divorced and had come looking for me again, it was only natural for his heart to stir with unease. I could see it in his eyes, so I stood on tiptoe and planted a firm kiss on his cheek. Don't worry, I said sweetly. I already told him. My husband will only ever be you. He can't compare to you in any way. Lucas's tense expression melted in an instant. The smile on his face couldn't be suppressed. Honey, go rest. Dinner will be ready soon. Ever since that night, I'd been extra cautious, afraid Brandon would show up again. I waited for Lucas to pick me up after work every day before heading home. Brandon's life had hit rock bottom. I wouldn't put it past him to do something crazy and try to drag me down with him. Meanwhile, Lucas and I continued to live our peaceful little life. I heard through the grapevine that Brandon had borrowed some money and started a business. He made a bit of profit, and to my surprise, Evelyn Cooper, the woman who had divorced him, went crawling back, begging him to take her back. When I heard that, I couldn't help but scoff. Evelyn really didn't fear death. She'd been beaten so badly last time that she ended up in the hospital for days, and now she had the nerve to go back. Thanks to the advantage of retaining his past life memories, Brandon quickly expanded his business. He became somewhat locally well known. I often saw expensive gifts left on our doorstep, but Lucas always sent them straight to his parents' house. That was until Evelyn showed up at our home. Evelyn twisted with jealousy and rage as she glared at me. Summer, why are you still seducing my husband? I never imagined I'd be accused of being the other woman in my own home. It was almost funny. How exactly am I seducing him? I asked. He keeps sending you all those expensive gifts, and you say you're not seducing him? She snapped. I replied coolly, I never asked for those things. I gave them all to his parents. Also, as far as I recall, you and Brandon are divorced. Just because you saw he's making money now and went running back to him doesn't mean he took you back. Before you go calling him your husband, maybe make sure you're legally married again. That hit a nerve. Evelyn's face turned crimson, and she began stomping with rage. The truth was, even though Brandon had let her hang around, he treated her like a joke. He had money now but only tossed her scraps here and there like he was feeding a pet. She had begged to remarry him countless times, but he rejected her every single time. He even said, "The only woman I'd ever want to marry in this life is Summer." Evelyn knew that once Brandon got tired of her, he'd kick her out without hesitation. Just thinking about how cold and heartless he was to her, yet how devoted he still was to me, even though I was married, made her furious. She clenched her teeth and growled, "Summer, I'm warning you. If you ever meet with Brandon again, don't blame me for what happens next." Before I could even ask what exactly she meant by that threat, a loud smack rang out. The same Evelyn who'd just been threatening me suddenly had her head whipped to the side. A red, swollen mark instantly formed on her cheek. Brandon had appeared without anyone noticing. He grabbed her by the hair and snapped, "Who told you to come here and bother her? You got a death wish or something?" Evelyn immediately dropped her tough act and whimpered, I'm sorry. I won't do it again." Brandon didn't spare her another glance. He turned to me, voice low and apologetic. "Summer, I didn't know she'd come here. I'm sorry. I'll take her away right now. Don't worry, it won't happen again." As he spoke, Brandon Walker yanked Evelyn Cooper by the hair and started dragging her away. I called out after him, "Brandon, stop sending me those useless gifts. Whatever I need, my husband will buy it for me." Brandon froze mid-step. After a moment of silence, he responded with a low gruff, "All right." I watched them disappear down the street, thinking that everything was finally over. But just when life seemed to return to normal, a brutal murder case suddenly rocked our entire city. At the time, I had just finished a routine checkup and was leaving the hospital with Lucas by my side. We were about to head home when a woman covered in blood was wheeled into the ER on a stretcher. Lucas immediately shielded my eyes, afraid I'd be scared by the scene. It wasn't until later that I found out the woman rushed into the ER that day was Evelyn Cooper. Apparently, once she realized Brandon would never marry, she stole a large sum of money from him and ran, but before leaving, she set a fire and burned down an entire warehouse, destroying all of Brandon's inventory. Brandon had just started building his business again, right when things were finally growing and stabilizing. That stockpile had been his key investment. He hadn't even paid off the full cost yet. He was planning to sell the goods and then settle the payments afterward. But now the warehouse was gone and his cash reserves had been wiped out. His entire venture collapsed overnight. Driven to madness, Brandon somehow found Evelyn before the police did. He attacked her in a frenzy, stabbing her dozens of times. She was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was too severe. She died shortly after arrival. Brandon was arrested at the scene and sentenced to death. Before the execution, he sent someone to deliver a message. He wanted to see me one last time. But I had no desire to ever cross paths with him again. And having just given birth, I refused the request without a second thought. After Brandon's execution, people gradually stopped talking about what had happened. The gossip eventually died out. Now I live with a husband who loves me deeply. And every day I watch our child grow stronger and healthier. Life has never been this peaceful or this full of joy.